Hello, you beautiful people, and welcome to I Am the Hammer, the show in which I talk all things Grey Knights. This is episode 2 of my mini series, Grey Knights 101, and today we are diving into some tips, tricks, and combos. Let's dive in. So thanks once again for joining me. If you missed out on part 1, that was the episode in which I talked through all the basics, the rules, the stratagems, the enhancements, different units. I gave some list ideas. So go check that out if you haven't. But today is going to be a bit more focused on the micro elements of playing the army. So I'm going to be talking about what to pick up at the end of your opponent's turn. I've got some general tips and tricks covering a wide range of things. Got a bit of a section on Mists of Deimos, a bit of a section on Sigil, and then just some general thoughts on list building specifics, just things to be aware of from things that I have learned over the last many months of playing Grey Knights. So, Teleport Assault. As we spoke about in the last episode, this is your army rule. At the end of your opponent's turn, you get to pick up 3 units. But what unit should you pick up? Now, just a little side note here. Really important you do this. You are picking them up at the end of your opponent's turn. You obviously draw your cards in your turn. Make sure you pick your units up before you draw your cards. Otherwise, that's unfortunately cheating. It gives you a big advantage. Like if we did it the other way around, you could pick up a unit because you knew you had drawn a particular card and you wanted that unit to do it because it would be the best for doing that card, for example. So yeah, just make sure you're always remembering to do it before you draw your cards. Now, when I first started playing Grey Knights, I very much went down the route of, this unit could probably do something, this unit can probably do something, and why not this one? And that was kind of my total approach. But the reality of the situation is you need to be planning out your macro strategy for your turn now, at this stage. So I will often say to my opponent, sorry, this just takes me a bit of time. I've just got to work out what I want to do next turn. And obviously, we have to build in the fact that cards are going to happen, and that might well change things or dictate how we want to play the turn. But it's really important that you have a general overview. So, for example, at the LGT, I was playing into guard, and he went first. He moved everything forwards, and I looked at the boards and I thought, well, I think I want my paladins, my big shooty paladins. They're going to go over to the back, and where there's a gap, they're going to shoot and kill everything on his home field objective. And then I can sigil away or mist away or whatever I want. And then also, I think maybe these interceptors can drop down by his natural expansion objective, kill the Calidus assassin that's there, and then fire and fade onto the objective and steal that. And that was my general game plan. Those were 2 things that I wanted to happen, which meant I needed to pick up the sigil unit of paladins and I needed to pick up my interceptors. And then, as we'll discuss, I had other choices. I then drew behind enemy lines and assassinate. Huzzah. Doesn't that work out beautifully? It doesn't always, so we do have to make allowances. But what I'm trying to get at here is it's really important to plan out what are the things you're trying to achieve. I've done a video a long time ago. It's a general 10 ways to advance your play. It's gone down really, really well, like lots of wonderful feedback, thousands of views and stuff. And in one of those, one of my tips is talking about at the start of your turn, you want to work out how you're going to score your cards, how you're going to secure your primary, how you're going to deny your opponent's primary, and what units do you need to try and deal with from your opponent. And that's the sort of thing that you want to be thinking about here on this turn. That will then help you to work out what you want to pick up. Having said that, the first thing you want to think of is, what can't I pick up? Now, the obvious ones here are things that are on primary. We're going to score you primary. So strikes that are about to sticky an objective, don't want to pick those up. Any unit that is holding an objective and is going to get points for it, you almost certainly don't want to pick them up. But then it becomes a bit more specific. So, for example, a unit that's in a position to guard on an objective in Burden of Trust, you wouldn't want to pick them up. A unit that's about to score sabotage or recover assets, that sort of thing. So, yes, you just need to go through each unit and go, can I pick this up? Once you've done that, you will then have 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6, who knows, units that you can choose from to pick up. So, sorts of things to consider. Are you planning on having an aggressive turn or a passive turn? If you're going to go for an aggressive turn, you want to pick more likely be trying to get your big hitters into play. That might be a Purifier brick, a Paladin brick, 3 Dread Knights, whatever. It's always really useful just to have something to pick up that or have in deep strike that you can do an action with. There have definitely been times where I've like picked up 2 Dread Knights and my Paladin brick, say, and then I've gone and drawn containment, and I'm like, oh. So always, if you can, 2 killer units maybe and 1 action unit, but just something that can do that. And the sigil unit's often good for this because sigil units can get obviously out of dodge. I'm not necessarily saying this should be like a big 10-man unit, but if you have got like a librarian with sigil and 5 terminators, you do see that around. That's a unit that, the sigil isn't as scary. It's more of a nuisance for your opponent rather than something that is being presented in a really scary brick. So maybe that unit can go and do something straight away, and then you're not potentially losing a unit when you're doing the thing. So that's just something to bear in mind. A classic example of this was I played a scrim match recently. Into Votan, and turn 1 I drew containment and behind enemy lines, and I put my unit of 5 strikes in his deployment zone, and cool, great. I got 3 plus, I got 6 points out of that 1 unit. Cool. If I'd picked up the sigil unit and done that same thing, I'd have got 6 points and not lost the 5 strikes because the sigil unit could have just teleported away. So, obviously, not always the right thing to do, as we'll discuss later, but sigil units sometimes. And one important thing is also, and this is why you're planning out your turn, should I just move this unit rather than pick them up? Obviously, when you pick them up, barring using the stratagem, you have to come down 9 away. So sometimes actually you don't want to be picking up a unit. So that is why you want to be planning, right, this unit's going to move there, charge that, etc. Right, so I don't want to pick them up. It might be you've got a unit which is completely in no man's land, in which case, okay, yeah, actually, I'll pick this up and relocate. Maybe your game plan is, oh, they're threatening over that side of the board too much. I'm going to pick up these 3 units and get them over to the other side of the board to safety, and now hammer on this part of the board. Again, it keeps going back to that first point. Make sure you know what the macro game plan is for your next turn. And then once you've planned that out, it should become a bit easier. Hopefully that all makes sense. So, general tips and tricks. These are all a bit ad hoc, a bit random, but hopefully there's something here that maybe you haven't thought of before. So, Terminators have an apothecary, which means in your command phase you get to bring 1 back. Now, that happens before you score your primary, which means that if you are not on an objective and then you regen, you can move that model onto an objective. Okay, that's incredibly powerful. So things to be thinking of with your Terminators. A classic thing, which you see lots of armies with regenerable units, is they'll put 1 guy out on an objective and then the rest of the unit behind cover. Then someone will shoot into that unit, and let's say they kill 3. Okay, cool. You take the 1 off from the one that's on the objective, and then you take 2 from the pack. And then when it comes to your turn and you regen, you can then regen that 1 guy that was dead back onto that objective. It's such a powerful tool that you almost want to be trying to set up Terminator units to be able to do that. It's not just regenning onto objectives. Let's say you have misted away, or you've then rapid ingress down, right? So you're now going to be a certain distance away. Then you might regen, and now you're closer for that charge you were going for on your turn. So all these sorts of things, it's really important to be thinking, is there a way here where I've lost a model? Is there a place I could put this where actually regenning is really useful? So just bear that in mind. That's really important. There's lots of little things that can happen there. As we spoke about last episode, Grey Knights are really durable. The reason for that is the fact that you can have cover and armor of contempt, or true silver armor in the case of Grey Knights. That's basically meaning you're ignoring AP2 unless they ignore cover. It's going to take AP3 for them to get you onto a 3-up save. And even then, a 3-up save is really good. So at all times, try and get your models onto cover or in cover. Really important. And then just be constantly aware that AOC is definitely something that could be happening. So be thinking, do the maths, I guess, is probably the best bet. Do the maths. Is this going to save you? It is great. I'm going to use Arm of Contempt. A case of not doing the right thing would be my scrim game against Votan. The aforementioned strikes that went into the deep strike. He fired 12 Votan bikes into me. I was like, Armor of Contempt, I'm on a 2-up. And obviously I'm thinking, 2-up save means I can't die. Well, actually, no. It just means that when they're 2 damage, it just means 1 every 6 shots, you're losing a model. And sure enough, I lost that unit after only 9 bikes, because I just kept rolling a 1 every so often and something would die. So just do the maths with Armor of Contempt. Is it a big deal? Is it important? But it is one of your best stratagems, so definitely try and get used to it. Now, this third point is one that I probably still don't use anywhere near as effectively as I could. Think about it, especially, I'm going to be talking about this in frame of the 3-inch deep strike. We just traditionally go, cool, my unit goes here, in this space. Can I fit 3 inches? Here. Because I'm going to put them in a place where I can shoot something. Actually, even if your opponent's trying to deny 3 inches, usually it's deny 3 inches with a block. The reality is you can string out these big bricks far and wide to cover huge areas. So you can end up snaking your 3-inch unit all around in a big long line, and that can cause lots of problems. It creates a huge area for your opponent to not move within 9, otherwise you're going to miss away. It gives you abilities to steal objectives and shoot at huge different areas of the board because you're strung out. So just think, especially when using the strat, I have got so many more options here. Are there places I want to spread out and get to? Because your units do not need to come down just in that bunch. Now, this thing is relevant to all armies that are kind of elite based. Now, if you're playing Drakari, that unit can run out there, get containment, and then die. Who cares? Grey Knights, if I run out there and get area denial, or no, if I run out there and get established locus for 2 points in the middle of the board and then die, that was not good value out of that 120 point strike unit. Okay. So therefore, we really need to be thinking, can we give up a unit, and can it, if we are giving up a unit, can it achieve multiple things? So what are these multiple things? Well, it could be denying some primary and scoring a card. It could be behind enemy lines and move blocking a unit. Okay. These are the sorts of things that you want to try and achieve. Now, obviously, your hope might be hoping that this unit's going to go out there and then they'll trigger mists, and great, I won't lose the unit. But when you are kind of definitely losing a unit for a reason, usually scoring a decent card, like a 3 to 5 point card, is there a way it can achieve another job for that turn? If it be it move blocking or tagging or whatever. Okay, so you just generally can't afford to just throw away a unit. It has to be achieving multiple things. Okay, so just try and think, what else can I do with this unit? Don't just bung it in this corner for behind enemy lines. Could I put it a different place behind enemy lines, in which it's then move blocking something, or it's drawing a resource away from an objective to come and deal with me. Those sorts of things. Now, obviously, episode 4 is where I'm going to be talking about the macro gameplay of how to approach over 5 turns. But for this, here's a little snippet, if you will. Try and deal with the opponent's screens early. Turn 1 and 2 are the hard turns for Grey Knights, as your opponents usually push up, take the middle of the board, and you're like, right, I've got to try and unpick this. So if you can deal with those screens early and those point scoring units early, then that will create gaps and cause issues for your opponent, who's now having to use their damage dealing units to score points. A general good rule of thumb is try and target an opponent's killy stuff or their scoring stuff. Don't try and divide it. Pick something to focus on. That's generally quite a good tactic anyway. In case of Grey Knights, it's definitely, can you get rid of those screens, open up those spaces to then get into later. Finally, don't forget grenades. Most of our army has grenades, right? And grenades is, in theory, a reasonably reliable 3 mortal wounds. We're not good at killing tanks, but grenades plus a vortex of doom from the librarian, on average, that's 7 mortal wounds. You only need to get through 2 heavy side cannon shots from a dread knight, and that's a dead tank. So yeah, just don't forget grenades, guys. There have been definitely a few times where I have forgotten grenades, and it's long run had irritants. But of course, it is a valuable CP, so it's not always the right play. Right, Miss of Deimos. For those who can't remember, then firstly, what is wrong with you? But secondly, this is the stratagem, 1 CP. If your opponent moves or advances or falls back and ends their move within 9 of one of your units, you can either pick them up and put them into deep strike, or you can move them up to 6 inches in any direction. Now, obviously, if you're a Terminator unit, you're only moving 5. No cheating. Okay, so how are we going to use it? Right, well, once again, very important. When you're in your movement phase and you're moving your units around and you're deep striking them down, this is when you are planning on using the stratagem. You are working out which of these units am I missing. It's definitely happened before where, like, I've gone second, say, or I've gone first. I'm like, I'm going to move this unit of interceptors, let's say, over here, and I'm just going to put pressure. I'm going to make him move something over to deal with it, and then I can miss away. And at the same time, I'm going to move these strikes over here. And then in my head, suddenly I'm like, now I've got 2 things that I want to miss. And any remotely canny opponent is now going to pick up one of my units. So I'll then go, right, actually, no, I'm only going to move this 1 unit. Okay. So have a plan. When you're putting them down, have a plan. Know, in an ideal world, you will always know at the end of your movement phase, or have a very strong inclination, depending on how things go, which unit you are going to be missing away. Okay, it takes a bit of time to get there, but yeah, try and have a plan in your movement phase of which one will be running away. And in terms of positioning units, here's a couple of things. As we said earlier, you can really spread out units and cover lots of areas, cover lots of things. And so if you do that, you're creating lots of opportunities. You're really blocking off space. Think about this, I don't know, this long 10 Terminator line, conga line. That whole line has got a 9-inch bubble of, if you come near me, you now don't get to shoot my Terminator brick. Okay? Like, that really can cause lots of issues for an opponent. So don't be afraid to spread out and create these areas. And also, it's the same thing. Because mists into rapid ingress, especially like the 30 Terminator build, is so strong, if you can get a unit which is therefore in a position where its 9-inch mist threat covers the whole objective, that means if they want to move on to that objective, you're going to get to pick up and go somewhere else with rapid ingress. So that is also something to bear in mind. So, rapid ingress. It is an important combo piece, especially with the bricks. Um, so here are some ideas of how you can use it. So just to make clear, you could spend 1 CP on Mr. Deimos in their movement phase. We then get to the end of their movement phase. You've got a unit in Deep Strike. You can then spend 1 CP to rapid ingress them down somewhere else on the board. So you can use it to get into position for a charge next turn. This is probably the most common. Obviously, with the Terminator brick, it's now going to be a 5-inch move and then a 4-inch charge because you would have landed 9 inches away. So that's really, really nice. And heck, if you're regenning a Terminator in that unit, then actually it's going to be an even closer charge than 4 inches. You can use it to get a good Overwatch. I played into Drakari once, and I could see that Lilith was going to be charging with 5 strikes, with 5 witches into some strikes. So I went and positioned, I rapid ingressed a big blob by her. So as soon as she charged, I would just Overwatch, and I had a very good chance of wiping out that entire unit. As it was, my opponent was very, very clever and managed to charge something else first, get his Archon to within 12 inches of that unit, and didn't with Vec to deny me because I couldn't Overwatch for 2 CP. But hey, is what it is. But that's the one thing, especially with like things like purifiers, right? Get that those flamers in good places. It can also just be to back up a unit for heroic. So 10 paladins, I'm just going to jump down onto this objective that you're planning to charge. Now I get to heroic in. This is probably less common, but it does happen sometimes. You can just heroic, you can just rapid ingress back on down onto another objective and get some primary. Maybe they've not got many guns pointed at a particular objective. Maybe they're not sat on that objective, and you can just get over there. Or it might be you can get near it and then regen onto it. It's another option. But all in all, lots of nice things there. But wait, we are not done with Mr. Deimos. Oh no. So, one of the best ways of enabling mists is through tagging opponents. As we've established already, when they complete a fallback move, if it's within 9, then you can mist away. So therefore, tagging things is a really great way of trying to put damage out in combat and then running away when they fall back. So if they don't have any combat threats, tagging is key. So a big example that I can give is when I played into Ironstorm, when that was a big thing and you were playing into like 12 tanks, right? You go and tag that tank, and then you position it so that you can consolidate, or maybe with the back end of a unit sweeping around, you can then tag something else, okay? Like a scout unit, for example. You then kill that tank, or maybe you don't, it doesn't really matter, because you've tagged this little unit of, say, scouts. As soon as they fall back and they end their move within 9, you're going to be missed away. So let's say I charge in, kill this tank with my shooting and combat and blah, blah, blah. And then I've tagged this other unit. They fall back because they want to be able to shoot you. Great. They've had to finish within 9. You pick up. You could then rapid ingress down somewhere, or you could just stay in deep strike. It's entirely up to you. Now, obviously, if you're tagging a tank that is, they usually have more than 9-inch move. So all you need to do when you charge a tank is, rather than just going, oh, I'll just hit the front of the tank and then I'll have my second line in base to base. What you need to do is make sure your units go around the side of the tank. And so that means that although it might move 10 inches, they're not going to be able to get out of 9 because you're already covering part of those inches off to the side of the model. So it's just something to bear in mind if you think you're not going to kill the tank, or you're just trying to tag stuff. Really think about your positioning and are they going to be able to get 9 away. It's a really useful thing. So it says here, remember you can't miss while in engagement range G. Good typo there. So when you do consolidate into another unit, just be careful, right? They might well have some really hard hitting combat unit lingering, and you might have just tagged this. Haha, yeah, I'm going to tag you. So that means when you fall back, I can miss away. Maybe that unit has no interest in falling back because he's now going to send over 10 Votan berserks, and you now can't miss because you are in combat. So that is something to be in mind. And it puts emphasis on your opponent to do things in the right order, of course. But yeah, just be aware if they've got enemy combat units around, it might not necessarily be the case that you do want to tag something. So just bear that in mind. All right, Sigil of Exigence. So this is obviously the enhancement, which means that when they target your unit, you can then immediately teleport somewhere else on the board. At the bare minimum, it is a free round of shooting. So with my 10 paladins, I know that even if I do have to go and sit out in the open and, I don't know, go for a 9-inch charge or whatever, at least I know if it all goes wrong, when they get targeted to shot at, I can run away. Okay, so the most important thing is just don't let them get things to bear unexpectedly, and suddenly you're having to burn sigil to try and not lose 3 or 4 paladins, right? Okay, or terminators or whatever. So always just make sure you are getting some value out of it, even if it is just a free round of shooting, and that can be really important. As I said earlier in my game against Guard, that unit dropping back, it dropped into the back lines, wiped out the entirety of his home field. Then he moved some stuff back to shoot it. I then teleported to 9 inches away from the middle of the board, and I went and got stuck in with some tanks in the middle and just was able to hold everything up for multiple turns. So yeah, minimum 3 round of shooting. Now, it's also important to note, don't just, I've been targeted, I'm going to use my ability now. Can you tank the shooting? Do the maths. How many models am I actually going to lose here? Like, if you're playing something like the brick list with 30 Terminators, then losing 2 or 3 Terminators isn't actually a big deal at all, especially because you're going to regen them, especially if you're in a place you want to be. So just bear that in mind. Don't just automatically pull the trigger and go, I'm going to run away. Just think, can I take this? The ideal situation with Sigil is you have managed to put yourself in a position to enable them to move everything to go after that unit. They don't want to, but they have to. They have to put lots of line of sight things in, and then you go, cool, I'll Sigil away. So yeah. In an ideal world, try and hold on to it until turn 3. Sometimes easier said than done. And this isn't a catch-all, but as we said earlier, if you're killing all the screens and that sort of thing, you're creating gaps. Once you get to turn 3, you should have killed a few units, hopefully. And then you've got lots more space, lots more options, and your opponent's probably not going to have as good a chance at actually ever dealing with this unit. If I haven't popped Sigil by turn 3, I don't think I ever lose that Paladin unit. So if you can hold on to it, that's why I generally commit my Paladins around turn 3. And I might have deep struck them down and used them to shoot and kill something, but I've put them in a space where they can't bring much shooting into that unit, so I don't have to waste my sigil. I've had games where I've been completely out of ideas and I've just stuck them down in the open and just used the shooting and gone, well, they're going to sigil, but it is what it is. So yeah, just don't try and hold on to it. And much like this, have a rough plan of what you're going to do with your sigil when you're putting that unit down. You should realistically be aware if you're going to prop that sigil or not. Obviously, your opponent could do something entirely unexpected, but when I put a unit down, I'm putting them down because I accept I am going to use sigil and I'm okay with that, or I'm putting it somewhere where I think is safe. And there's something I keep trying to remember, and twice it is now just gone out of my mind. So I guess you're never going to find out what that is unless I randomly remember it again. Sorry about that. Right, finally, list building combos and advice. This is just some random thoughts I've had based on my experiences. Some of this might sound really obvious, some of it might not. So, number 1, where should you put your sigil? In my opinion, now obviously it can't go on any named character, so it can't go with Drago. So in my opinion, most commonly you will see it on a Grandmaster or a Brother Captain who are with Paladins, okay? The reason for that and not for 10 Terminators is because Sigil is best used with a shooting unit. Paladins are better at shooting than Terminators due to hitting on a 2-up and having more special weapons, okay? So that is where you will see it. You can see it on a Librarian going with 5 Terminators. Then that's a nice little middle ground for that sigil unit. Other than that, you might see it on a Grandmaster Dread Knight if you're going for the 6 Dread Knight build. And again, that's just quite nice. Oh, I can put this unit here, this Grandmaster here. I'm going to get all the shooting, and then I could just run away somewhere else. Somewhere nasty, because it's almost like a rapid ingress, isn't it? And Grandmaster Dread Knights like the rapid ingress because they only move 8. So just something to bear in mind. As we said there, Drago goes with the Terminators, Grandmasters and Brother Captains with the Paladins because of the ignore mods or the sustained, that sort of thing. Librarians are much less likely to blow themselves up when attached to a unit. That's because by leading a unit, they give that unit a 4 feel no pain against mortal wounds, and then you take the mortal wounds on other models, not on the Librarian itself. When the Librarian's on its own, you're getting no feel no pain, and you're having to take all the wounds yourself if you roll the 1. If he's leading 5 Terminators, or heck, even 10 or Terminators or Paladins, if you've substituted him in for the Thousand Suns matchup, then actually you're now going to go, oh no, I've rolled 6 mortal wounds. Okay, cool. I'll get a 4 feel no pain against that. Okay, so just something to bear in mind. If you're willing to take Crow and Purifiers, now 5 Purifiers for 125 points is a complete waste of time. 10 Purifiers for 250 points is a complete waste of time. If you add Crow into the mix, it becomes sort of worth it. The reason for that is obviously Crow gives them +1 to their Purifying Flame. So that is when you will see that package. Don't ever consider 10 Purifiers just on their own. You're just not getting enough value out of that unit, unfortunately. Crow actually went up in points, which was a bit unfair a couple of data slates ago. The other time you might see Crow with no Purifiers, and hear me out here, is if you've built a list for fixed. So there are some lists going around. If you check out 40k Dirtbags, he won an RTT and did an hour video on talking through his fixed list plan. So it's quite a good video. He didn't do this, but you could take Crow. The reason you would take Crow on his own is because he blanks the damage when he fails a save. So that's something to bear in mind. Quite annoying for 90 points. And obviously he has a 2 up, 4 up as well. Interceptors. We all like interceptors. They work nicely with a Rhino. This is for 2 reasons. Number 1, you get out 3 inches, you move 12. That's 15-inch move. You can then charge something. You could then fire and fade 6 inches. Okay. You could get out 3 inches, advance and go 18 inches, so that's 21. Spend a CP, fire and fade to have assault, fire and fade them an additional 6 inches. You've now moved 27 inches with that unit to steal an objective, to get behind enemy lines and move block something, whatever. Okay, that's really nice. Furthermore, this is the other nice combo. Interceptors can get out, move somewhere off. You then move the Rhino. Oh, sorry, ignore what I just said. You get the interceptors out 3 inches. You then move the Rhino, advance it, let's say, somewhere. You then know where that Rhino is. You then move the interceptors, shoot something, fire and fade them to within 3 inches of the Rhino, and then you can re-embark into that Rhino. Okay, because it's now a different phase. You can't embark and disembark on the same movement phase, but because we're now in the shooting phase, you can do it. So you can just use that as an interceptor brick to be zipping around and being a nuisance. So just something to consider. Right, but I'm seeing more and more, and this was another thing 40k Dirtbags spoke about with their fixed list. And Rhinos, they're not that expensive, really, and they just add a bit of play. That extra 3 inches is a nice combo. Here's something I've learned in my experience. Taking 1 or 2 Dread Knights is not worth it. Dread Knights are quite good. The reason they've gone up in points by so much over time is because people were spamming them. The reason people are spamming them is because it gets past their weakness, which is their reliability when they're on their own. They just don't have enough attacks and shots to be reliable. Obviously, the mass improves dramatically the more you take of them. Taking 1 or 2, I took 2 to LGT. They did fuck all, I'll be honest with you. So, we don't want to take 1 or 2. Unfortunately, often in lists I build, I'm like, 2. All my points work out really nicely. And then I'm like, no, need the 3rd. Okay, so I keep getting drawn into this, but Just trust me on this. Take 3, 4, 5, 6, or 0, and there's lots of wonderful lists out there which take 0. 1 is definitely not worth it. 2, you more often than not, you're probably going to be a bit annoyed. And the final thing, I really like the navigator. So the navigator as an ally, 75 points. He has like some battle shock shenanigan type thing, but his thing is he's a 12-inch no deep strike bubble. Now the reason I really like this is because it covers your backfield objective. Now obviously you're sticking it with your strikes. We all know that. But then there's still that concern that as you're moving and you're going off, like some armies are going to want to just deep strike down into that area and they can just steal it. And if you've moved away and you're using your strikes for all that sort of thing, suddenly your backfield is open to deep strike. Not with the navigator and that 12-inch no deep strike bubble. We're seeing a lot of 3-inch deep strikes around everywhere. That no, you're not coming near me of the navigator is really, really powerful. And it's only 75 points. So yeah, definitely something to try out. I would highly recommend that piece. So there you go. Hopefully there were some decent ideas there. As always, if you've enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe. The thing I really liked about my last video was just all the comments. So thanks a lot. Are there any tips and tricks that you've picked up? Obviously, this is things that I have experienced and I have used before, but I mean, there must be loads of stuff out there that I haven't thought of. So please do in the comments, like, share your ideas. As always, come and join the Discord. We've got lots and lots of people. We've got well over 500 people in that Discord, and there's a Grey Knight section which has chat going most days actually. So yeah, definitely come and check it out. Last time I spoke about how who knows when my next video will be because I've got a baby on the way. Well, guess what? Baby's still not born. It's like 3 or 4 days overdue now. Stubborn baby. But hopefully I'll be able to get episode 3 out at some point in the next week or two. And in that one, I'm going to be talking about things to consider when deploying Grey Knights, because I know I certainly fell into the trap of going, it doesn't matter, I pick up and I teleport, so who cares where I deploy? And it's definitely not the case. And also maybe things to consider for turn 1. So that's the plan for the next episode. But yeah, as always, thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.